2023 is drawing to a close, and I have a hot take. It has been a great year for MMOs. That's right, the genre that every MMO YouTuber, including me, has said has been dying for like the last 10 years, I think is in a really good place. But it's one thing to say it, and it's another thing to prove it. So that's what I did. I went all the way back to the year 2000 and looked at every single year in between then and now to find out what happened in MMO history, which years were the best, which years were the worst, and now I'm going to force you and sit there and listen to me talk about that. The reason I did this is because it's such a common opinion that MMOs are just bad nowadays, but I think we're in a better spot than we've been probably since like 2007. And to prove that that's true, I made a tier list. Who doesn't love tier lists? What's that? No one has used a tier list since like 2019? Well, I'm gonna do it anyway. So join me on this journey through the 21st century's history of MMORPGs, and we'll find out which are the worst and which are the best. But you know what's not the worst? Today's sponsor, Southern New Hampshire University. That was a great transition. I don't care what anyone says. MMOs are really hard to make, and a lot of companies struggle with it, and that's probably because their game devs didn't go to SNHU. SNHU has a huge selection of online accredited degree programs, but the one I'm most interested in is the game dev program. In this game dev program, you can learn how to do everything from coding in C++, C#, Java, things that state-of-the-art game engines are written in. But you'll also learn how to do things like 3D modeling and texturing so your games can look however you want them to look. You want to make one that looks like Runescape? Go for it. You want to make one that looks like this? You can do that too. All of this is taught by people who have first-hand experience in the game dev industry, which means you're not just learning theoretical things, you're actually going to learn stuff that's going to be applicable to a job in game dev. And if game dev's not something you want to go into after the program, you'll have a great basis of fundamentals to do programming and 3D modeling in the future. And all of this is extremely affordable because SNHU has one of the lowest online tuition rates in the entire country. So if any of this sounds interesting to you, go to snhu.edu/idle. There's also a link in the description, and there you can learn more about like the average annual salary for a programmer. So thank you so much to SNHU for sponsoring this video. They're one of my favorite sponsors, seriously. They're so great to work with. I also want to give a shout out to my Patreon supporters. They're amazing people. I call them Milkies. No one's really sure why. And if you want to support me, you can do so for as low as $3 a month at the link in the description. More about them later. Look at this tier list. It's so clean and fresh and nothing's on it. But first, let's break down the tiers. At the top here, we have the cream of the crop, the best of the best, the years that changed MMOs forever. Some people call it the S tier. I call it the mom-made pizza rolls tier, because there's truly nothing better than when mom makes pizza rolls. Right below it, we have the years where things were really great, and maybe they weren't super genre defining, but everything was super good and everyone was happy and everyone clapped. I call this the literally better than sex tier, parentheses, I don't know what sex is. Then we move on to years that were overall positive, but maybe had some highs and lows and were overall a little bit of a mixed bag. I call this the Lost Season 1 tier. Very good, but it leaves you wanting more. Moving on, we have years that are a little bit messy, disorganized. Maybe there's some high points, but it's really mostly lows and it's kind of just disappointing. I call this the rest of Lost. And then we have our lowest tier, years that set the genre back, that nothing happened in or only bad things happened in. I call this the Scrubs Season 9 tier, or the Community Season 4 tier, or the Game of Thrones Season 8 tier. You don't want to be in this tier. It's a bad tier. Now that we have that established, let's start with the year 2000, a year most people will remember for George Bush, I guess, I don't know. The year 2000 was kind of a quiet year for MMOs because it was still ramping up in popularity. We already had games like EverQuest and Ultima Online out that were gaining popularity, but there weren't really any earth-shattering games in this genre yet. The most notable thing that happened in this year was the EverQuest expansion Runes of Kunark, which I hear was pretty good, but I was 5 years old and I wasn't playing EverQuest. So I'm gonna give this one a solid B, Thanks for being here, but you didn't do much. 2001, you know what game I love? RuneScape. You know what came out in 2001? RuneScape. Where do you think this year is going? I'm not gonna hold you in suspense. It's right here, 2001. Mom made pizza rolls. Seriously though, RuneScape is exactly what I mean when I'm talking about genre-defining moments. RuneScape came out in 2001, and now in 2023, more than 2 decades later, it is still one of the most popular MMOs in the world. It's gone through many iterations since, but this is just undeniably a historical moment in MMOs. Other things happened in 2001 too. We had some Ultima Online expansions, some EverQuest expansions, and we even had MMOs like Dark Age of Camelot come out, which weren't nearly as popular as RuneScape, but were still loved by very many people. We also had EverQuest's Shadow of Lucklin expansion, which is generally liked by people, but I just want to say I'm not going to be talking about every EverQuest expansion because there's like 200 of them, so don't get used to me talking about those. Either way, S tier, good job, RuneScape. 2002, remember when I said I wasn't going to be talking about EverQuest expansions? This year is defined by an EverQuest expansion. Planes of Power came out in 2002, and really not too much else happened, but Planes of Power was so good that it honestly, I think, was a big moment for MMOs. It made EverQuest a household name for gamers. Other than that, 2002 was really a quiet year for MMOs because I think companies were starting to realize how much money they could make, and they were just starting to work on them. So I think 2002 is like a B tier, you know, right here, Lost, Season 1. 2003, this is when the capitalists found out about MMOs and really put their whole capitalisticity into them. This year had so many MMORPGs come out, it's actually mind-boggling. Here's just some of them. Second Life, Star Wars Galaxies, EVE Online, Toontown, Puzzle Pirates. Some of these MMOs are really massive at the time, Star Wars Galaxies especially, but it's not really the earth-shattering year that belongs in the mom-made pizza rolls tier, but it's still really, really good, so I think it slots nicely into the A tier. I forget what I called that one. I think it was something about sex, but here it is. 2004. There's only one thing that matters this year.
But there is also no indication that anything can slow the explosive growth of the intoxicating game called World of Warcraft.
The hit fantasy game World of Warcraft.
Greg Straff playing World of Warcraft has become an obsession.
World of Warcraft. It has 9 million players worldwide, many who say they spend hundreds of hours playing the game every week.
World of Warcraft came out in 2004, and the genre changed forever. Yes, there were other things that happened. RuneScape 2 came out this year, but saying that this year is defined by anything else other than World of Warcraft would be frankly ridiculous. This game came out and immediately became one of the most massive games, let alone MMORPGs, in the world. World of Warcraft was so popular, it killed Dungeons and Dragons for like 10 years. Like, I'm not even joking, like people stopped playing the tabletop game Dungeons and Dragons because of World of Warcraft. You also had EverQuest 2 come out this year, which is most known for not doing as well as World of Warcraft. So hey, congratulations to EverQuest, but I think this year firmly belongs in the mom-made pizza rolls tier. 2005, how do you follow up the most popular MMO of all time releasing with the greatest MMO of all time releasing? That's right, in 2005, we got Club Penguin, baby, let's go! I know what you're thinking. You were 10 years old when Club Penguin came out. You probably didn't play Club Penguin, and you'd be right, I didn't. But my friend's little sister did, and I made her character called Booger Fart. So, another big thing that happened in 2005 was I started playing RuneScape. So it's in the S tier. But seriously, 2005 was a big year for MMOs. You also had games like Guild Wars come out, which is another one of the staples of the genre. But you take the good with the bad in this year, because this was also when Star Wars Galaxy's new game experience came out. And this was the first sign of the wowification of MMOs, when every game was going to try its best to be like the cash cow that World of Warcraft was. So even though there's some really high highs this year, I think there's some lows. I'm putting it right into the Lost Season 1 tier. 2006 was another kind of mixed bag year. You get things like Guild Wars Nightfall, which is when I started playing Guild Wars, and I loved it. You get RuneScape's construction skill, which was the introduction of player-owned housing in RuneScape. You get another really good EverQuest expansion in the form of the Serpent's Spine, but really the most important thing that happened this year was WoW continued dominating, and then South Park made an episode about World of Warcraft. Lost Season 1, I guess, I don't know, it's kind of like a meh year. 2007, this is the year I always look back on as the greatest year for MMOs. Maybe it's because my favorite MMO of all time is old school RuneScape, which is a snapshot from 2007, but maybe it's because it's genuinely just a great year. This year you have things like Lord of the Rings Online coming out, Pirates of the Caribbean Online coming out. You probably didn't play Pirates of the Caribbean Online, but me and my friends did, and we loved it. There's a really great video that recently came out by Mitch Mannix about Pirates of the Caribbean Online. Check it out. It will tell you all you need to know. Seriously, I loved this game as a kid. You also get WoW's first expansion in the form of the Burning Crusade this year, which is when WoW just continues getting more and more subscribers and news coverage. I think what really makes this year so great is how many people are playing MMOs, but there aren't too many out there yet. It's really a healthy balance of supply and demand, but it's still not the perfect year, so I think it slots nicely into literally better than sex. I don't know what sex is. 2008. This is the year I think people will always think of as the peak of MMOs, for one reason in particular.
World of Warcraft.
This is when WoW Wrath of the Lich King came out. This was and is to this day the peak in World of Warcraft subscribers. It is the peak in MMO storytelling. It was just an event you had to be there to understand. Honestly, everything else this year pales in comparison, but the rest of the year was still really strong. You had Lord of the Rings Online's expansion Mines of Moria, which was amazing. You had RuneScape releasing Summoning, which I loved at the time. I don't love it anymore, but it was so game-changing that it was super exciting. And then you had Wizard 101 come out, the cherry on top of the sundae that is this amazing year. Just look at this game. Tell me it's not the best thing you've ever seen. You're lying. Shut up. But the most iconic thing about 2008 was the fact that Sims Online closed its doors. Did you know there was a Sims MMO? I didn't know there was a Sims MMO. Anyway, yeah, this is mom-made pizza rolls easily. This is like the most mom-made pizza rolls year of all mom's pizza rolls. 2009 had the unenviable job of following up probably the greatest year of all time for MMOs, and it did so decently. Wrath of the Lich King was once again the most important thing this year, as you had the Fall of the Lich King come out, which was the end of Arthas Menethil's story. You had the Icecrown Citadel raid. It was all around just the climax to the most important expansion of all time. Other than that, you get Ion released, which is a meh MMO. You get Champions Online, which is a bad superhero MMO, and not much else happens. So despite the iconic Icecrown Citadel raid, I'm gonna say this is a Lost Season 1 tier. It's not bad, it's just, you know, meh. 2010. This is a year where things start to take a bit of a turn. The MMO population is finally declining, but MMOs don't stop coming out. The most notable thing this year is, once again, a World of Warcraft expansion, because Cataclysm came out. Don't get me wrong, Cataclysm was still extremely popular, but for a lot of people, this was the turning point of when World of Warcraft just changed forever. You also had the original Final Fantasy XIV come out, which was an unmitigated disaster. Oh my god, this thing was so bad. So you might think this year belongs somewhere in the rest of Lost tier, but I actually think it belongs in the Lost Season 1 tier. Why? Because Hello Kitty Online came out. That's cool. 2011 is just another huge year of releases, but it's also the first year we get some notable closures for MMOs. We get things like Star Wars The Old Republic, Allods Online, DC Universe Online, and the first ever WoW killer in Rift, which was extremely popular when it came out. But this was the end of Star Wars Galaxies, which even after the new game experience was really beloved, and it was the first time I remember a kind of emotional closing of an MMO. So despite the fact that this year did have some cool games get released, it kind of sticks out as a turning point for the genre, and not necessarily in a good way. It was by no means a disaster of a year, but it's the first one that I really feel like fits nicely into the rest of Lost tier. 2012, just when I thought MMOs were getting bad, they get good again. 2012 was great. You had Guild Wars 2 release. You had Terra release. Terra sucks now, but it didn't used to. You had Mists of Pandaria come out, which was kind of memed on when it came out, but I still think is a really strong entry into World of Warcraft's expansions. But I think the most important thing that happened this year was the release of a little something called the Evolution of Combat in RuneScape. This was, for a lot of people, including me, the end of RuneScape. It killed it forever. Thanks Jagex for doing that. This is a tough year, because I feel like it could be literally better than sex, but I actually think it slots a little bit nicer into Lost Season 1, because I love RuneScape, and I can't look past the fact that this is the year it died. 2013, in this year you get the single most important MMO of the decade released. Final Fantasy XIV, A Realm Reborn. You could consider this maybe an expansion, but let's be honest, it's completely different from the original Final Fantasy XIV in every single way, in the fact that it's actually, you know, good. Final Fantasy XIV would start a little bit slowly, but as we all know, it would become the most popular MMO in the world by the 2020s because everyone stopped playing World of Warcraft. We'll get to that later though. But more importantly for some people, like me, 2013 was the year that old school RuneScape came out. It also meant RuneScape 3 came out, but who cares, because old school RuneScape came out. If you're unaware, old school RuneScape is just a 2007 version of the game, and at the time, that's all it was. There were no updates happening. It was just, here's what the game was like in 2007, enjoy. And boy did we. And then everyone stopped playing it. This year did see the devastating closure of my true love, Pirates of the Caribbean Online. There's a private server up now, though. I'm probably gonna play it, to be honest. It looks great. All in all, this is a major year in MMO history. Not only does it provide the most popular MMO today, but it provides, I think, one of the best examples of a good modern MMO in old school RuneScape. So, I'd say this is literally better than sex. If you didn't close Pirates of the Caribbean, you'd be in mom-made pizza rolls. You made a big mistake, whoever published Pirates of the Caribbean. I'm gonna bunch the next 3 years together because this is when we really enter, I would call, the dark age of MMORPGs. From 2014 to 2016, we did have some WoW expansions, some cool OSRS updates, but this is when the MMO player count is at its lowest that it would get to ever so far. In 2014, you had things like Elder Scrolls Online launch. Cool, but it's kind of a mid MMO. It didn't change the world. In 2015, the most notable thing that happened was Trove releasing. Okay. In 2016, you had Blade and Soul and Black Desert Online come out, in the West at least. They'd already been out in the East for a while, and they were fine. But really, at this point, MMOs had kind of fallen into a rut of expansions and updates that weren't really doing anything different, and were desperately trying to be like WoW. And most importantly, this is when microtransactions became just a staple of the genre. This was the first time period in my life where I wasn't playing any MMO, not even RuneScape, which I had literally been playing nonstop until like 2013. I'm sure some of you out there have fond memories of this time period, but for me and for a lot of people, it's just, oof. So all 3 of these years I think fit very nicely into the Scrubs Season 9, Community Season 4, Game of Thrones Season 8 tier. They were garbage, they were bad, and they make me sad. 2017 kind of fits into the same category in my opinion of being really bad and really underwhelming. But we did get Albion Online released, and I know that Albion Online is not everyone's favorite MMO, but I do think it is actually really good, and it tried to do something at least a little bit different, so it just barely bumps this year up to the Rest of Lost tier, which is still not great, but you know, come on, it's not all bad. Come on, we're doing something. Although this was the year that Club Penguin closed its doors. Maybe this is a terrible year. 2018 is a lot like 2017, where it's mostly nothing happening, but then some cool stuff happens to kind of prop it up. Like you get Path of Exile's, I would say, best league ever in the form of Betrayal. You also get things like Battle for Azeroth, MapleStory 2, but unfortunately, this is when RuneScape Classic would permanently close its doors. This is another Rest of Lost tier year, and at this point, MMOs have had just about a decade of terribleness. Just awful, horrible, no good. Oh man, this was rough. And then 2019 came along and changed everything. 2019 was amazing. This is the year that MMOs would finally come back to the forefront in 2 big ways. The first, and the one that meant the most to me, was old school RuneScape having its first ever league, a temporary game mode with boosted XP rates and all sorts of crazy stuff. I made a whole video about it just before, go watch it. You also had Final Fantasy XIV Shadowbringers come out, which is a beloved expansion to the game, but the most important thing that happened by far was the release of
World of Warcraft
Classic. That's right, Blizzard finally decided to listen to their player base and release an old version of the game, and everyone freaking loved it. It was awesome, and even to this day, it is still awesome. We will get to that later, because this is not the last time a year would be made better by WoW Classic. But with so much iconic stuff happening and so much movement in the MMO genre for the first time in so long, it's hard to argue that this year is anything other than mom-made pizza rolls. So it's a rare Blizzard W on this one. 2020 would try its best to follow up 2019, and it did a decent job. You had things like RuneScape's Trailblazer League, which would have the peak old school RuneScape player count until literally this year. You'd also get things like RuneScape 3's Archaeology skill and WoW's Shadowlands expansion, which was bad. But the most important thing that happened this year was COVID, and it meant that a lot of people were playing MMOs, which was nice. The reason they were playing MMOs was not so nice. Not much actually happened in terms of MMO development this year, because I think people were just starting to realize you could do things with MMOs again, and for that reason, it's in the rest of Lost tier. And now we've hit 2021, and who could forget the iconic release of New World, which went bad. New World was the first hyped MMO I could remember in so long. Everyone was so excited for it to come out, and then the beta was a disaster, and then it released, and that was a disaster. So all in all, yuck, not great. This was also the first expansion to WoW Classic in the form of Burning Crusade, and I think just releasing expansions to WoW Classic was a huge mistake in the first place, so I'm not a fan of that. And old school RuneScape was also starting to dip in player count at this point, with updates starting to feel a little lackluster. The most important thing that happened was Group Iron Man, which is cool, I guess, but it's hard to argue that this year was in any way productive for the MMO genre, and I think New World actually set it back quite a bit. So sadly, after the S tier that was 2019, we followed up with two stinkers, especially this one. It's in Scrub Season 9, Community Season 4, Game of Thrones Season 8. It's bad. It's bad. And then 2022 happened, and finally, World of Warcraft made a good expansion. Dragonflight came out. They fixed the talent system. People were excited about the game again. Old players were coming back to retail. It was amazing. Wow, good job, Blizzard. I guess, I don't like saying that. You also had OSRS getting a huge new raid in the form of Tombs of Amasket, which just reinvigorated the player base. There was also Lost Ark launching, which is a hugely popular MMO. I don't like it, but people do, so that's nice. The terrible MMO Terra closed. That's a win for everyone. And we also got WoW Wrath of the Lich King Classic. Again, I really hate that Blizzard just re-released expansions to Classic. I think it's stupid, and they get an extra L on this one because they also released the WoW token. WoW Classic is great because it has no microtransactions, and Blizzard just couldn't help themselves. But it's hard to say that this year was bad, so I'm gonna put it in Lost Season 1. There you go. Now we've reached present day, 2023, and everyone seems to think that MMOs are dying. But I actually think this is one of the best years MMOs have ever had. WoW Classic is finally getting the love and attention it deserves in the form of official hardcore servers, which were so much fun and are so much fun. You also get Season of Discovery, Blizzard finally putting some new development effort into WoW Classic. It's just awesome, and it's so much fun. Old school RuneScape is getting unbelievable updates like Desert Treasure 2, the new League, Trailblazer 2, which is amazing. RuneScape 3 is even getting new skills like Necromancy that the player base loves. And even some games like Elder Scrolls Online are getting pretty decent expansions in the form of Necrom. I mean, all in all, this year I think has been amazing for existing MMOs. And we have all the hype of games like, Ashes of Creation is a whole topic on itself, but we have hype for MMOs again, and it just feels like the community is growing again. I think this has been a great year for MMOs, and I think we have a lot to look forward to in 2024. So this year is in the mom-made pizza rolls tier, right alongside some iconic other years. But let me know what you think. Am I wrong? Am I stupid? Am I bald? Yes. Thanks for watching. Sorry, you caught me looking at epic memes on my phone, but while I have you here, why don't you leave a comment that says, damn, those memes were epic, so that everyone thinks epic memes were had in this video. Making these videos would not be possible without the help of my Patreon supporters, so just let's thank them right now. Their names are all on the screen, and they're going up, wow, they're all my favorite, and especially these people over here. These are the members of my tier. They give me too much money, way too much money. So thank you so much to John, Kuna, Bozzy, Suede, Oxford, and Paradox. Oh my god. You know what's crazy is they're all extremely sexy too. Or so I've been told. I think I'm legally not allowed to say that. So I take it back. If you'd like to support me on Patreon, you can do so for as low as $3 a month, and you can even get the 2024 version of this milk sticker. It might not have milk on it, but it will be new. Thank you so much.